According to reports from CNN and other media outlets, U.S. President Trump has shifted his attitude toward Russia. Trump publicly stated in Scotland that he is disappointed with Putin, and thus he no longer commits to the 50-day deadline for a ceasefire agreement between Russia and Ukraine. Now he has set the deadline to 10 to 12 days. Trump's statement undoubtedly means that the U.S. position is further leaning toward Ukraine, and it is very likely that the U.S. will take action against Russia in advance. Based on Trump's previous statements, he may use sanctions and tariff measures to crack down on Russia. However, given that there is almost no large-scale trade between the U.S. and Russia, Trump may tend to impose the so-called secondary sanctions, that is, to suppress countries and individuals that have economic interactions with Russia. If the U.S. uses such tactics, the actual target may point to BRICS countries, including China, India, and Brazil. Following Trump's statement, Zelensky immediately expressed his welcome for Trump's resolve, claiming that Ukraine would strengthen cooperation with the United States. At the same time, Zelensky has already taken an extremely provocative action. He approved a series of sanctions targeting 45 Russians and 50 companies and enterprises. Zelensky stated that among these measures, the so-called 18 measures involve sanctions against 53 entities and individuals, including those from China. It is obvious that Zelensky is using these related enterprises, entities, and individuals as a gift to show loyalty. Ukraine intends to please the United States, especially Trump, through this means. Moreover, Zelensky specifically mentioned China, clearly aware that the United States is maliciously suppressing Chinese enterprises and other entities. Kyiv is cooperating in this act, with the sole purpose of showing loyalty to Trump and attempting to secure more support from the United States. In response to Ukraine's such behavior, China has stated that it will firmly safeguard the legitimate and legal rights and interests of Chinese enterprises. The statement and warning from China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs this time are rare in the more than 3 years of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and it is almost pushing China to lean towards Russia. Actually, I don't understand why Zelensky would do this. What benefits has the United States given him that make him willing to offend two supermilitary powers at the same time, not regretting even if he gets hit? Why is Ukraine's behavior wrong? Because Zelensky's so-called sanctions are, to a large extent, sanctions for the sake of sanctions. As mentioned earlier, Kyiv is doing these sanctions more to please the United States and Trump, and even deliberately naming specific targets. Zelensky himself admitted that this is Ukraine's synchronized action with European sanctions. To put it bluntly, Ukraine is just following in the footsteps of the West, lacking an independent stance of its own. From Ukraine's own perspective, such sanctions are not necessarily meaningful and may even have a negative impact on Ukraine itself. After 3 years of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, Ukraine is now in a state of devastation, relying almost entirely on economic aid from the West to survive. At present, the two sides have resumed negotiations, and the situation has eased to a certain extent. At this point, what Ukraine should do is prepare for reconstruction and step up efforts to secure international support. If more foreign investment is willing to enter Ukraine after the conflict ends, it will naturally be a good thing for the country. However, Ukraine still chooses to take sides and use sanctions and other means against entities and individuals from other countries. It has even issued a statement with Israel to intervene in Iran-related issues. This is a typical act of alienation. With weak strength, it fails to understand its own situation, which also shows that Ukraine has started to learn from the United States. Yet, given Ukraine's current situation, engaging in such tactics will only create more difficulties for its own recovery and development, bringing no benefits whatsoever. This is also the consequence of choosing an actor as president.